Hello. All right, so we're live. All right, so I want to respond to this. So Connor Cregan, what is also not mentioned is that in parts of Africa that were traditionally Catholic, Pentecostalism is beginning to displace Catholicism, just like it is in South and Central America. So that is something, as I've been researching this particular point, because I'm only looking at American Catholic policies in terms of how the implementation of Vatican II happened. I've been running across a lot of comparisons between other countries and how they implemented as well as where they are right now. And I think this is an important point because that's starting to have a red pill moment, right? Like there's a lot of people who are coming to terms with, okay, well, Africa's doing great or at least better than us, but are they really in terms of what they're dealing with? Or are they just kind of behind the times where we got there first and then hopefully I'm not like yelling or too loud, but where it's like we got there first, and then Protestants are coming in like they do, and following up and trying to displace Catholics in terms of faith. And so there's a huge history of that happening from the New World to other places where Catholics come in, and then maybe the Orthodox come in, and then Protestants come in later after essentially things have toned down. Yeah, that's a very interesting thing, and I think I'm still thinking about it, but I'm leaning towards yes, that I'll be doing a video on that. All right, so what is this video about specifically? So this video is about this video, but the comments. And so it's not just me simply reading the comments, it's me answering the comments. So I could make a video where I go through and I systematically go through, answer every comment, but I simply don't have time to do that in a reasonable time frame. I tried doing it last night, and the editing would have been nuts compared to just me scrolling through it and answering critiques or objections to what I presented. So I'm just going to answer it as we're going. And if you have any questions, if you're on YouTube, you're going to be able to post a comment in the chat and I'll be able to see it, and we can kind of go from there. All right, so here's the video, why you as a Catholic should care about the priest crisis. If you haven't seen it, you don't necessarily need to see it to understand the rebuttals that I'm going to be answering, but it'll help you with some of the references and the finer points of what I say, because I do get technical at times in there. So, all right, let's get into this. All right, so the first one that I wanted to mention or wanted to get at was this comment by TV Head. I think a major reason is that families are smaller than they used to be. If a parent has 4 sons, then they're okay with encouraging 1 or 2 to become a priest. However, if a parent has only 1 son or maybe 2, then they will encourage that son or sons to carry on the family name and provide grandchildren. So that's a very interesting point, and it is an influential point, at least for right now, right? Because our averages in terms of fertility are fairly low. I go over the fertility rates in the video where I compare TLM and Novosordo parishes, where Novosordo parishes are about 2.3 as of, I think, 2012. And then TLM as of 2019, they're at like 3.4. And so depending on which group you're in, like I'm kind of an outlier because I go to a Novosordo and I have 5 kids. So like I'm an outlier in terms of the averages, but in terms of the in terms of the general comparisons, that does play a part, but that plays a part now. So at the time of the council ending and when the implementations were happening, the birth rate per woman started to drop. So that's true, but it started to drop for the general population. And so the general population, we live in America, is predominantly Protestant, right? So the idea of Protestants accepting contraception was a generational thing at that point. It was really like it was fairly important because in 1930, for the first time, a Christian group, the Anglicans, said contraception was okay. And so with that, it created a ripple effect within Protestantism, where contraception was being used. And so you did see, as in Protestant countries, which would include the US, a decrease in population. And so in addition to that, you had this this influence into American Catholic culture. And, when Humanae Vitae came out, there was not a small rebuttal. There was quite a loud response from priests. And even in Canada, there was a huge, I believe it's called the Winnipeg Statement, where it just rejected Humanae Vitae. And that was the entire Council of Catholic Bishops in Canada. So contraception was like a very big, real threat in terms of this exact point. And I think when we talk about this, there's now, and then there's when the council happened. And when the council happened, that's when it started to become a thing in the Protestant realm. And it was influencing us Catholics, generally speaking. Hey, Kevin. So, and so that is important because we see that now, where men, when they raise up their boys, there's a hesitancy to say go into the priesthood. I think TV Head's right on the money for that in terms of our day. But back in the day, when 5 kids per family was actually normal for a Catholic family, I don't think that was a problem. I think that was something that came later, and arguably as a result of the implementations of Vatican II. So again, the document, just to clarify, Vatican II, the documents are not what's being debated or argued against. It's a valid council. The point is how it was implemented and how the sacraments were affected, how devotions were affected, how ways of life as a practicing Catholic in the everyday was affected. And so that took on different forms depending on what country you were in. And in this case, I'm talking solely about the United States. So even though I did reference Canada, but like they're like kind of like our little brother up north, but okay. So let's see. Meanwhile, traditional seminaries and traditional orders are bursting at the seams. There's just not enough room. Our future lies in a return to tradition. I'm actually going to do a video where I compare seminaries and ordinations from seminaries, from traditional seminaries, and those that are more Novus Ordo or diocesan. So I'm actually going to be addressing that later in a more formal video with more numbers. All right. So vocations to priesthood have declined. The older guys are dying, retiring, burning out. I'm a pastor with 3 associates serving 9,000 families. So that's way more than 2,000. Not people, families. 2 associates are from other countries. So please pray for him and that parish so that he can help those families. Let's see. If your only son wants to be a priest, just to remind his sisters they can keep their last name and give it to their kids too. Okay, all right, that's gonna start a fight. So we're gonna just keep going. I'm Canadian. We're experiencing a decline in the priesthood here too. One of my coworkers is a brother who was ordained 5 months ago, and he told him that the current crisis faced by the church is a decline in number of priests ordained per batch. Which, yeah, like that's. So the reason why I focus on the priesthood as opposed to the general population, because the general population, according to parishes, is about 66 million, as I show in the video, in the original video. The problem with that is just looking at the number of people who are, quote unquote, members does not mean that they're practicing. And looking at the rate, according to Kara, it's about 17.3% of that 66 million that go to mass every week. So that's a really big problem. Now, I did just do a video on an Axios video where it showed that the rate as of 2024 is 23%, which is much better than 17%. that one was done for Kara in 2022. So I know I'm doing it like this is kind of like a head thing, and I'm sorry. It's just the nature of answering these. I can't have all the graphs ready to just throw up, so just throw up and answer them directly. But the what is it? Yeah. Okay. So let's go on to the next one. So the chart only shows the quantity side of the issue. Quality is downhill too. Men who, oh, okay. So yeah, sorry, I forgot to finish this point. So priests are a good indicator of a thriving parish, diocese, country. If your priests aren't there, it means that there's not a compelling enough reason for groups within the population, within the laity, to commit themselves in such a drastic fashion to God. And so priests and religious are a good indication of that type of culture. The more priests that come out of, like, that's why like traditional Latin Mass, people will focus on this number, that they produce a lot of priests. Well, that's because that by itself is an indicator of a good thing, because you are having men willing to sacrifice their lives quite literally to spend the rest of their lives as priests. And so that's a really again, it's a very good indicator of a thriving parish, a thriving diocese, and a thriving country. So all right, so let's see. My brother went to the FSP seminary in Nebraska, but discerned out. But my cousin is still there and will be ordained next year, I think. How long has it been? 6 years. Okay. Well, I hope everything goes well for your brother and your cousin with the discernment process. So let's see. Sometimes I feel like I've been calling to be a priest. Okay. So for there's actually, I was surprised by how many people, as going through this, how many people came and said, I am discerning the priesthood. I am seriously thinking of discerning the priesthood, and your video has emphasized this to me, that I should seriously look at this. And so I'm going to skip Cool Cat Baron, but it's just, it was surprising for me I wasn't expecting that response. But if you could please pray for everyone who's discerning the priesthood, because they're doing the right thing in terms of, you know, they're discerning, and they're taking their time to do that. And our responsibility in that case would be then to support them by praying for them. And so that's what I'm asking you to do here. So let's see. It's the traditional Latin Mass orders like the fraternity. Okay. I already said that. It's bad that there's, all right. I think the curve will G5. Okay. Excellent video. Okay. Sorry. I'm just skipping through to, so this is all right. So this is a very good critique that happened. Adity at Kunal. So he says, to be fair, the number of people who identify as Catholics and the number of people who attend a Catholic church regularly are not the same. Many of these parishes are nowhere near full capacity, but maybe only like 10 to 30% of the Catholic populace attend Sunday Mass. Therefore, the priest shortage isn't as severe as you think. So this is in line with what I was saying earlier, that of the 66 million, only 17% actually go, or 23% based off of a recent study. And so what really should happen is to give a more accurate understanding of those that practice, 23% times 66 million, and then relate that to how many priests there are. And that would show what the ratio from priest to the laity is. The problem that I have with that is that even though practically on the everyday, that would be more accurate, those that are baptized are still baptized. And so they would still count as Catholics, even if they aren't practicing. And so, you know, in the ideal world that, you know, a miracle happens and all of those people come back, you know, the ratio gives basically a maximum amount that I think is a good indication to show at least where the population's at. Now, I'm not saying it's perfect. I think I agree with him. I agree with the critique that in terms of the practical everyday, that you would want to do the 23% times the 66 million to then get what the ratio from priest to laity is. And I'll actually do that and put it in a comment to this video. So that'll happen after this. So okay. So that's another comment saying the same thing. Thanks, love this. Good comment. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for presenting the data and analyzing both realistic and unbiased way. So this is another guy calling for going to the priesthood. Went to I'm a in the Vatican II tanked her. Okay, so I'm a seminarian, just a couple of years away from ordination. The Vatican II tanked our vocations line is a common story we tell among ourselves, but I'm more interested in asking why. I think you can point to some key mental habits after the council, like emphasizing the lay vocation and lay liturgical ministers, both good in themselves, don't get me wrong, to the exclusion of ordained ministry. Also treating the priest's role in the parish in an overly pragmatic or functional way. I've literally had young men tell me they're discouraged from pursuing diocesan priesthood because I don't want to be some religious CEO. And so this is kind of what, when I say the implementation of Vatican II, the abolishing of the minor orders, I think plays a huge role in that. So leading up, so if you don't know the minor orders are like the lector, the oh my gosh, I'm missing them now that it's live. Blessed Solanus Casey was one. I can't, oh man. Okay, all right, anyways. So basically, I believe there were 9, and technically I think we have 2 or 4 now, but there's a lot that are given to the laity. And so readings at Mass, for example, with the lector would be one of them. And that that kind of leads to a problem in emphasizing the vocation itself, right? Like this goes into, well, what about altar girls, or what about not altar girls and just altar boys? And does that have an effect? Because that's a very similar talking point. Instead of the laity, you're talking about someone who's helping the priest in a very direct way during the Mass, and you're having a space that was traditionally for men, having women included in there. And so I would say, that is definitely something that influences the rate of those who want to discern the priesthood. Now, altar girls didn't happen until they weren't allowed until like the 90s. But what I'm doing is I'm giving you a comparison of modern day of something within our lifetimes. I was born in 87, so that happened within my lifetime. And so what happens with allowing girls in men's spaces, or the laity in spaces reserved for those that are seriously discerning the priesthood? Because we kind of don't have that space, right? Like, we don't have that space in the Mass or in the parish. Like, ask your priest. All right, do we have any place where we help hone people for vocations in the parish? Like, does such a thing exist? I don't know if it does where you live, but I've never heard of one. But historically we've had that where there's a line of men who are following suit, and it typically is the altar boys or the lectors, but that wasn't always. I guess I don't want to make the case that it was just that, but it does have an effect. And so again, this is like the implementation of Vatican II. And then on top of that, we have functionally made priests to be, like he said, religious CEOs. We don't look at priests as father. Like, we call him father. We're like, oh, thank you for the sacrament, Father. It's great. Thank you for the Mass, Father. It's great. Thank you for baptizing my kid, Father. That's great. But like, how often do you invite them to spend a Sunday with you or a Saturday with you? How often do you invite them to share a meal with you at your home? Invite them to go bowling? It's fun. I have a video. One of my first videos I put up here was Father Eric going bowling with us, and an amazing thing happens. But go and watch that 60-second video. It's a very good video. But it's this idea of he's your spiritual father, and you should treat him like that. And so, and he should treat you like spiritual children, not just, the bottom line. And I think a lot of that gets missed, this is where a lot of like problems happen. Like this is where Susan of the parish comes into play, where power plays are made between a small group of people, not necessarily a family of people. And it's a very complicated dynamic, but essentially, what we currently have today is we've lost the familial aspects of the priesthood to most people who attend mass in a way that the priest should be understood as. And again, not just simply functionally. And so, all right, so got a comment. Okay. Having boys serve at mass gets them used to seeing the priesthood as service. It seems that gets lost frequently, that both holy orders and matrimony are vocations of service. Right. And so kind of like with losing one, you lose the other, right? Because if we only focus on marriage, you lose the sacrifice of the mass because you don't have any priests. But if you just have, well, I'm not going to try to make a profound statement there. All right. I'm just done. Yes, I agree with what's being said. All right. All right. So let's see. Yes. Sorry. All right. So if you watch the whole video, at the very end, I compare the seminarian levels. And there are 3 seminarian levels. There was high school, the rate of high school seminarians, which was very high at the end of the council. And then you had college seminarians, and then you had pre-theology and theology seminarians. And so he's talking about, in reality, the pre-theology theology seminarian numbers are the main ones that matter, because those are the ones who actually make it through the formation process to ordination. And so that is both true and not true at the same time. And so if you have imagine like a huge funnel. This is used in sales a lot, where they kind of treat this funnel where you have a huge base of people that you reach out to. And from reaching out to them, there's a retention rate from just simply reaching out to inquiring. And then you reach out to those that inquire. And then there's those that inquire move up a level to, all right, well, I'm going to buy the product that you're selling. So there's this funnel aspect. And in a very similar way, it happens within seminaries. All right, you have high school seminarians. They're discerning the priesthood. All right, they go to college for seminary. They're still discerning the priesthood. Maybe the retention rate is like 30-40%. I couldn't discern. I couldn't calculate that based off the graph alone, how that works, because they didn't show that. But or at least not that part of the report. And then from there, those that are in college, seminary and college, then move up to those that are seriously thinking about being ordained. And then obviously the end goal is they're either ordained or they discern out. And so, and there's a retention rate for every one of those. And if you remove the bottom level, like, it's not surprising that 7-8 years later, the dip happens in the one that is the level that leads to the ordination. And so it is the main one. So I guess just saying it is the main one in terms of the closest step, but in terms of the one that matters, I don't think that's the case. I think vocation should be looked at before before high school ends, not after you get out of college. And that's currently the trend that we have right now. That's why I'm going to be helping with my parish, setting up a vocations program this fall to focus on high schoolers, to seriously think about if they want to get married, be religious, be a consecrated virgin, become a priest. That's really important. That is the most influential time that you're going to be able to do, to have those discussions, so that when they go into college, they're not basically brainwashed, or they're strapped with a whole bunch of debt and can't go into seminaries because seminaries and religious orders require them to no longer have that debt to pay off. And so before they have all the baggage that comes with college, for them to have the tools to discern so that they may skip college, or at least college at a secular university, and go straight into college at a seminary. And so it's kind of a big deal to me. Like, this is just bothers me. And so that's why I showed the seminary statistics at the end and how the graph worked. So all right, so chat's getting lively. To increase vocations, that's great. You reach out to the parents, that's true. So the problem with reaching out to parents is that you basically have to catechize them today. Historically, so like my biggest argument in the video is that the implementation of Vatican II, in the spirit of Vatican II, disrupted the faith life of people who were practicing the faith. And so when you have the culture coming at you, just like today, I mean, like right now we're suffering, right? Like we're having the Rainbow Brigade come at us. It's literally everywhere. The flag is going to be up in every Western country soon because that month is coming. And because that month is coming, but we'd like some support, right? And there's some people who are stuck in the middle or get hit on the side because their family, their friends, their children get swept up in it. And so it creates a clash. And if there isn't clear teaching, if there isn't a strong foundation of the faith to be continued, people get lost. I use that word legit, like in the word that it is. They get lost. They don't know where they need to go. They don't know if they're actually, lukewarm practicing. They don't know if what they're doing is within the scope of church teaching. They just get lost. And so when you have someone go from their whole life, they're going to TLM, say they're 25 years old, and then all of a sudden their devotions are dropped. The TLM looks very different. Ember Days is no longer taken seriously. All the sacraments are watered down. The way you practice as a Catholic fundamentally changes. Like you have the substance of the sacraments, right? Like they're still there. I'm not saying any of them lose their potency. God's grace still works through them. But how everything looks, in addition to the normal forms of devotion, are changed. And when you have something like the sexual revolution, which is very similar to what we're dealing with today, going down your throat, like it's a problem, and people can get lost, and we see that happen. So let's see. Right. Okay. So like, all right. Sorry, I'm just reading a comment someone put down. And it, yeah. All right. We had actually discussed fertility rates earlier today, or earlier in the stream. Are there preconciliar? Okay, so here's a really good one. Thank you for introducing these statistics. Are there preconciliar? Let's get rid of this. Are there preconciliar measurements or predictions that can be tied to this with a 100 or 150 year interval? And if the goal is to emphasize specifically the liturgy implementation in its role of the priest decline, then how much have we ruled out other factors? Have other denominations? And it just kind of, okay, I don't know why I can't see the rest of that, but I can't even click it, which is weird because I can do that for other things. So the first question or the first point being made, no, because the understanding or the way of survey sampling only goes back so far. So Gallup goes to 1935. Pew Research, I believe, goes to the 1990s. And then Cara, what I used as the foundation for that video, went to the 1960s, actually to the very end of the council, 1965. And so there are a lot of surveys that are going on that aren't they don't have a tenure that goes back that far. It's just, I wish they existed. Like even before the council. So using Gallup before the council is kind of weird because the surveys aren't as robust as they are now. And so like when you look at certain rates of retention or not rates of retention, but the average rate of those that go weekly, it fluctuates wildly from what's done within surveys from CARA, which CARA is a Catholic specific statistical engine, essentially. Like it's out of Georgetown. It's it's very it's statistics and how they gather it is very robust. It's very good. I have nothing but positive things to say about CARA. I think more bishops should pay attention to what CARA puts out. But the so I wish there was a good before and after with the council so that I could more robustly argue my point. The only thing I can definitively say is that there was a decline that started to happen with mass attendance prior to the council. That was shown, and that seems to be evident. But like as opposed to the 23% today, we're talking like 75% at the end of the council, or I'm sorry, at the beginning of the council, and then as shown in CARA, I think it's like 55% at the end of the council. So there was a dip in terms of weekly mass. So that's like throwing me off. Sorry, and then the second point is, so other denominations. So the other denominations question has like, there's a bunch of here that show, or at least ask the question, what about other denominations? And it's like, the answer is they really don't matter. And the reason why I say that is depending on what mainstream denomination you look at, they do fluctuate. But what you're answering the question for is, was there a global effect of the sexual revolution? The answer is yes. Like we know that it was. We're still living with a lot of aspects today that are a direct result of the sexual revolution. In addition, the nature of Protestantism and Catholicism is different. We have a hierarchy, and we're talking about a council that happened in a completely different country. We're not talking about how the U.S. Methodists or the Lutherans or the Anglicans over here or the Episcopal or any of the number of Protestants have done like what they've done over here. They've all been affected by it in one way or another, and how they're set up does matter. So I'm not saying it doesn't completely matter, but the way they're set up does matter. But that's not something that's going to be insightful with our population. How we implement, like it's like asking, I don't even know if I want to use this example. All right, so like you're on a dry day, like it's a dry day, you tend to get nosebleeds on dry days, and your blood vessels are really close to just hear me out. I know this is weird, but then all of a sudden you get punched in the face and your nose starts bleeding. And so like you could say that the dry day had an effect, but the bigger impact that dealt directly with your nose was the punch in the face. And so when we look at Vatican II, that directly affected the faithful. The sexual revolution, depending on where you live, may not have affected you in the same degree. And so there are geographical concerns with that may, like, depending on where you are, if you're in Michigan, New York, Florida, Texas. So that's another reason why looking at denominations would be a problem, because Southern Baptists and Methodists, Presbyterians, and Lutherans have different focal points in the country. and just to use a non-Christian version, like Mormonism, like we know that's in Utah mostly. And so it's where you are is going to matter with when the sexual revolution came about. And then so using denominations and comparing them in that way is not going to be all that effective, because you open yourself up to also a whole bunch of other confounding variables that need to then be addressed, which yeah. So like going back to the example, like we know that the liturgical reforms, but not just the liturgical reforms, but the implementation of Vatican II with devotions, because many of the devotions dropped. And so like I really do want to stress that, because like it isn't simply that there is an aesthetic change. Like the way of life for a lot of people their day-to-day did change because of what was being taught from those that were saying Vatican II said this, when in fact it didn't say that at all. And so that's, yeah, I guess I'm not trying to beat a dead horse. It's just a lot of this comes back to how we just the implementations themselves. Not to mention when it comes to there's another question here, and if I come to it, I'll just point it out. But they had asked specifically why the pastors and other denominations were dropping, which during the same time, and that's not entirely good, I guess. Like that's not a good comparison. One, because I don't know how you found the statistics for that. I legitimately cannot find the statistics of Protestant leaders dropping during the sexual revolution, not without going to every single denomination. And then on top of that, the idea that, again, we're not the same. Like the very nature of the leadership within the church is different from Southern Baptists. Like that, it's not the same. It is a type of situation where you're comparing apples to oranges. So, all right. So before I go into the next thing, I do want to emphasize one thing. And oops. All right. So I'm totally screwing this up. I'm sorry. Maybe a window. Yeah, let's go window. All right. So share. Sorry, I'm just not used to this. So I have an affiliate link for Shining Light Dolls, and today is the feast day of Saint Joseph the Worker. Saint Joseph is my patron saint, and he's my confirmation saint, and so I am I'm promoting this especially on his day, because he's a lot of people's favorite saint. But I do want to let you know that when it comes, I do have a collaboration with them. And so I'm going to link this in the live chat as well as into my description in the video, where you get 10% off your entire purchase at Shining Light Dolls. And so they have a variety of things. We have the specific Shining Light doll here. I think we've had it for like 7 or 8 years. It looks exactly the same. Very durable. Like I've 4 kids that have used it. Very durable for those for like their mainline dolls. Just something I thought I'd throw out there. I don't typically do this. This is like new to me. So, but thank you anyway. All right, so we're gonna go back to the video. So, all right, so this one is Vatican II had no chance of stopping exit of vocations to the priesthood. It's because of the increase in wealth of Catholics. I currently attend the largest and wealthiest parish in my diocese. None of the current candidates for the priesthood in my diocese are from my parish. They're from much poorer towns in the diocese. So there's like a few problems with saying this. Like this is anecdotal. And like you can't, and it's not only anecdotal, it's anecdotal to today. And so the time at which this was happening, there was an increase in wealth for Catholics. But to say that wealth equals faithlessness is, I think, a very poor argument. there's plenty of groups of people who are faithful that practice the faith exactly how the faith should be done. Like I'm surrounded by, for example, I'm surrounded by a very I don't want to say wealthy, because it's kind of weird to say they're wealthy, but they're I actually have no idea. Anyways, they're Chaldeans. So I've a lot of Chaldean Rite parishes around me, churches, and you see the functionality within their families. Like I live in a subdivision surrounded by Chaldeans, and I see how they live and how they, spend money on friends and family. I have a lot of friends. I have really good friends. Like he's like my best friend, who's Chaldean, and we talk about this all the time. And where it's about priorities, right? It's about where you believe things are. If you appeal to the fact that, oh, wealth equals unfaithfulness, what you're doing is you're making a materialistic argument. And there is something to say, like Christ talks about, the rich man. But the rich man is very different from someone who's just attaining wealth. Or going up from like lower middle class to middle class, right? Like that is a very different thing. The rich man, he has a bunch of money compared to the rest of the people. And it's going to be really hard for him to, like, there are certain things that appeal to that when you are the rich person. But when it comes to, I'm not trying to do an exegesis on that statement. I'm not qualified to do that. What I'm saying is a group of people as opposed to one person making money. Like if everyone around you is making the same amount of money and going up and living a better life, that does not necessarily mean that then you are going to be unfaithful. And so that's the problem with blaming it on wealth, because it's not the first time I've seen it. It is true that, again, Catholics did start to become wealthy, but that like there's just so many examples of just that not being the case. It's about your first principles, your first priorities. Is religion important to you? And why? How are you raised in that religion? How were you raised as a Catholic? Those are questions that matter. And sorry, I'm just reading the comments too, because I'm starting to get a whole bunch of okay. So there is a point where, again, there's a difference between saying someone goes from lower middle class, or I'm sorry, from like lower middle class to middle class or upper middle class. That doesn't mean that you're going to become unfaithful. It may mean that you're more likely to become unfaithful, but that doesn't mean that it's a deterministic thing. And so we got to be careful with description from a simply economic perspective, because what you then do at that point is you remove the spiritual and you get into a place like today where it's like, okay, well, we're wealthier today. I guess we can't do anything because we're so much wealthier than today, right? I guess we're just screwed. It's a terrible argument to use. It's because we're still meant to evangelize, whether they're wealthy or not. And we have a history within the church where we had wealthy groups of people, not just men, not just individuals, but wealthy groups of people who are faithful. And so I don't think, again, like I'm only hampering on this because I've seen a lot of people point to this as kind of like, I do think it's a scapegoat. That this is something that is going to answer why it wasn't Vatican II, but it was the wealth people had. And it's just kind of like, well, like, again, that's a materialistic argument, and it defeats the purpose for today because, again, we're wealthier today. And so I guess we're only going to specifically evangelize the poor people. Like, is that what we're called to do? No, I don't think so. We're called to evangelize everybody. And wealth doesn't mean that you're unfaithful. So, all right. So kind of hammered, I guess. Yeah, I felt like I was hitting a dead horse, and sorry about that. Let's see. Yep. All right. So there's So I should not be missed that at the same time Ember days are removed from the calendar against the direction of Sacrosanctum Concilium. These days of universal fasting and praying for priests missing will have disastrous effects on future vocations. So again, this is like one of those things where the devotions were taken away. And then how was the not in accord with Vatican II? Okay, how was the implementation of Vatican II not in accord with Vatican II? Can you name something done after Vatican II that was not called for by the council? So I won't go through the list because I don't really want to do that. If you want to read the comment, go ahead. The point that I want to make here is how is the implementation of Vatican II not in accord with Vatican II? So that would be the spirit of Vatican II, where people said, oh, removing the vernacular or just using the vernacular completely. That's what Vatican II said was okay to use. And so they'd point to Vatican II, but then Vatican II says Latin has a place in the Mass. Same thing with Gregorian chant, same thing with the organ, same thing with a whole bunch of things that should be in the Mass but are not. And so that it's not that the implementation from that angle isn't in accord with Vatican II. It just isn't when you say like Vatican II says that Latin should be in the Mass, and then there's no Latin in the Mass right now. That doesn't make any sense. But then it's not so much that the implementation of Vatican II is not in accord with Vatican II. It's that the form of the implementation done was poor. So it's not a matter of it wasn't in accord with Vatican II outright, because they are trying to, like, I think several bishops of goodwill were trying to implement Vatican II in the way they thought would work best. We know that the way that happened led and leads to disastrous effects, because now we have a huge lukewarm population of Catholics that we never had prior. Like, that just wasn't a thing. And our priest shortage and religious sisters shortage is like a huge deal right now. So, I'm not going to go through the list of what the Spirit of Vatican II did, because that's what I end up doing there. If you want to read it, go ahead. But I'm not going to do that here. And I have to get back to work in like 8 minutes. So I've only got a few more to do. Let's see. Very different time. Okay, here we go. We're just gonna keep going because chat is just robustly going forward with their own direction on YouTube. So it is always about too many rules. For centuries, priests did not need 10 or 11 years of formation. Any man of good character and proper instruction can be ordained with holy orders. How much instruction is the crux of the situation? Secondly, many older men about the age of 50 are automatically denied. In addition, we would have married priests who may minister every sacrament except reconciliation, then have celibate, single, or widowed unmarried men able to be confessors and bishops. It is also about money and retirement. If it is a ministry, there is no need to pay them unless it is a full-time ministry. So this is going to be my last comment that I'm going to refer to. So for centuries, 10 or 11 years of formation, right? So like that depends, because during the Middle Ages, like you would be sent off, I think it was like 12 years old. And so you would have been ordained at, oh my gosh, I think it was still within the teens. So I guess he is correct where it's like 10 or 11 years is a very long time of maturing as a priest. Part of that problem, though, is like given today, our culture pushes off maturity. College is the new high school. In college, a lot of rash things are done. A lot of things that normal people in normal circumstances would not do, but because there's a surplus of money, hormones, and basically availability and access, people do a lot of stupid things in college. And, I went to a party school. I went to Michigan State. Like, they burnt couches. I didn't burn the couch. So like, that was not me, but I did walk by the tear gas, to see what they were doing. And so, so going to a party school, I know exactly what that was like, but like I said, it pushes, maturity. And then, as I stated earlier with the religious orders, both for women as religious sisters and seminaries. If you go to college and you still have debt, you're not going to be able to get into a lot of them because it requires that you pay that off. And if you don't pay that off, you're not able to get in, which obviously leads to people pushing off going to seminary because they have to go get a real job and pay down their debt. But then after they pay down their debt, they may be like, oh, I'm not going to go in the priesthood now. I met this one woman and I'm going to get married to her. Or maybe I did things that I shouldn't have done and it led to having a kid out of wedlock, which then excuses, like, you're not able to get into a lot of seminaries. In fact, I don't think you can get into any seminaries if you have a kid. So it's like, it's just a whole bad business to postpone vocation discernment to college. So again, I'm just going to be promoting, and continue to promote this point. If your kids are in high school, teach them how to discern vocations, whether they should be married, go into the priesthood, or go into a religious order, because that is the time they should be getting that preparation. Yeah, that's great that they're doing Calc 2 or calculus or doing some sort of advanced biology. That's awesome. But that is a materialistic aspect, and it has its place. But as the faithful, we as the faithful, we should be making sure that they have the tools, not just to do math and biology, but also to discern God's will for the plan of their life. And so I'm going to step off my soapbox there for a second, but yeah, I think that's it. I'm just going to look to see if there's any comments that are directly related to what I'm saying and not what Chad is saying. So I just Chad is ignoring you at this point. All right. So yeah, it's a very lively chat. So let's see which made me look. All right, so I'm going to get going because I do have to get back to work. I want to say thank you very much for taking the time to spend your lunch with me today, or however you're watching this. I will have a Shining Lights link inside the description that I'll add after I end the stream. And enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you Friday.